And we are live. G'day everyone, Mike Jeffrey here, and you are listening to My Creative Journey, Season 3, Episode number 4. Today I'm super excited because I'm bringing you an artist who is not a photographer, and if you guys have been listening to the podcast for a while now, you'll know that's one of my goals for Season 3 is to bring on more creative people who aren't just photographers and speak about their creative journeys, because I think there's so many parallels that we can draw from every artist and what they've been able to do over the course of their career and pull little pieces out of things that they've gone about, ways they've done things, been able to sell their art, been able to turn their art into a career. And I think we can take little bits and pieces, and I'm always inspired to hear from other creative people outside of the photography profession. So today's guest is Charli English. Charli is an oil painter specializing in landscape and ocean-inspired pieces. Charli also has a real center around sustainability in her work, and she has a whole series called Trash Pieces where she creates art from secondhand materials, which I think is super inspiring and interesting to talk about on this conversation. I first came across Charli's work on Instagram and was, blown away by the work that she's able to do. It's something so far outside of what I do, but also there's a lot of parallels as well between the types of images that we're creating, being an oil painter versus a photographer. And I wanted to get her on the podcast, and I was very thankful that she did accept and come on to today's episode to talk about a wide variety of things, from how she got started to where she draws inspiration from and where she's headed to in the future. Now, Charli is not a full-time artist or full-time creative, and we speak about that and how she balances that between being the CEO of Oaktree, a non-for-profit organization. We talk all about how she balances her sort of corporate career with her being an artist as well, and how she's been able to juggle that over the past few years, being an artist and going in and out of many different careers in her full-time job. So this is always something that is so interesting when I see someone pulling away from full-time work and working on art on the side, and how do we balance that? I think a lot of us creatives go through that. So talking to Charli about that in this episode was super inspiring. But I know I have a tendency to ramble on in these intros, so I'm just going to throw it over to Charli, and hopefully you guys are able to really enjoy this episode and pull a lot from it. So without further ado, here's Charli English. Hey Mike. Well, hello Charli, and thank you so much for jumping on the podcast and having a chat with me today. It's so lovely to get you on here, someone who's not a photographer. Really nice to be able to talk about the creative experience today with you.
No, thanks for having me.
I wanted to start in a bit of a strange place, but I think it's an interesting question for a lot of us, and something that I've definitely been thinking a lot about myself recently. And that is, how do you define success? I think for you, someone who is doing art, and anyone that's producing art and having their art actually sell and going out there in the world and having people appreciate their art, I think it's hard to think about, well, what are those sort of markers for success in that area? And is there a specific way that you think about it? I'd just love to hear a little bit about your thought progression and if that's changed over time.
I think it definitely has changed a lot over time. When I first started painting and selling my works, it was very much so dependent on whether the painting I was producing had sold. I would get so disappointed if I had produced a painting and it didn't instantly sell out, or, a month had passed and it hadn't sold. I would definitely see it as a huge failure. But just last year, that mindset has completely changed for me, because I went from having my paintings sell out every release to having about 9 months where I didn't get a single painting sell. I don't know what happened. I didn't change my strategy. My content was mostly the same. Maybe a few things here and there had changed, but I just think must have been that my audience had checked out and that people just weren't necessarily interested in buying the paintings. I mean, cost of living comes into it too. But then at the end of last year, I got invited to do this affordable art fair show, and I brought, paintings over the last 2 years that hadn't sold. I had 20 paintings show there, and 19 of them sold out within the 3 days. And I just went, oh, okay, so it's not about whether or not, they sell out instantly. It's just about reaching the right people and connecting my paintings to the right person, because they are quite personal, and so many people have particular attachments to certain subject matters. And I just think yeah, that's something that we can get quite restricted in when we have such a small audience on Instagram and Facebook, when you're a small artist and you've only got like, a couple hundred followers. How you find the right people for your paintings is very hard. But to get back to your original question, how I define success, I think now it's really hearing from people, whether it's, an Instagram message or if it's in person, and someone can really communicate the connection between my painting and themselves. It's such an incredible thing to think that whatever you're doing, whatever you're producing, has been actually able to evoke an emotion in someone and find connection in that person.
It's definitely special to feel like your art can speak to someone else outside of you, because it definitely connects us on that like human experience of the reason why we create this is because of maybe something just inside you, but then the fact that can relate to other people. But as you said, the hardest part is then finding those people and how do you make sure that you're being authentic to yourself while still trying to find those people. How did you get through that period of like going for so long without having one of your artworks sell?
Oh, it was pretty rough, but I had my other job at the time also come up, where I had this incredible opportunity in my other work life to step into a CEO role. And so it was not as impactful as what I think it would have been if I was still in the roles that I was in prior to that and had gone through that slump. But luckily, I was able to find fulfillment and joy in my other workplace, which has been fantastic too. Because I think that's also a very delicate balance between, if you put too much of yourself in your art and it doesn't sell or people don't like it, you risk losing a part of yourself every time you create a piece. You don't want that to happen.
Definitely not. Like, did you ever feel like changing the style of how you were creating things? Like, did those sort of thoughts come into the mind at that stage?
Absolutely. Yeah. I had thought about it constantly. Like, is what I'm producing what people want anymore? And, I was trying to move away from creating these little affordable paintings to making these larger ones that would actually maybe make me some money. And people seem to still want, these really small ones that I was not making anything for. I would actually almost go into deficit when shipping came around. So I definitely had moments where I thought, oh, I should just revert to that. I should be making a painting every 2 days and just getting it out there. And that's when I really had a moment where I went, oh, crap, I'm falling into the cycle of consumerism, and I'm actually now contributing to the problem if I start doing that. So I gave myself a couple months where I think I maybe only made one painting over a couple months, and so helpful to have a huge reset. Like, I mean, have you had any moments like that in your life as well, where you've had just like a huge reset?
Absolutely. I started as a photographer doing completely different work to what I do now, and I think that for me was the ability to. I went down a career of trying to sell, sort of doing like commercial photography, because I thought that would be what would be successful, right? And I think a lot of us target a route where, as artists, we think that the work is, but then the work starts to become not true to us as soon as we're sort of going after work that's going to be sustainable or something you can do like long term. And for me, that reset was like, hang on, I'm not enjoying this work. And by me not enjoying it, other people are realizing that as well. And so why would they hire me? Why would they draw anything from my style? How am I standing out if I'm just trying to be like everyone else? And so having that reset and saying, well, what is it that I enjoy about photography? What is my personal experience that I can bring through? And what is it that brings me joy? Because ultimately people enjoy seeing that, and that's what draws people in. People generally gravitate towards people who they can relate to and people who they can see are really passionate about the work that they do. And so for me, that was take that step back, hang on, let's have a bit of a reset. And I was very thankful. I started in photography around like 2019 into 2020. So there was a patch in there really where it was like, well, I don't have any work anyway. So I definitely had the grace and the space really to be able to step back and say, well, look, I'm not going to get much work in this time anyway. Let's go back and do that work of finding out what you enjoy before you jump into something too hard and get a year down the track and like burn yourself out without realizing that you don't really enjoy it.
Yeah. And is that how this podcast came about?
This podcast? Yeah. So I started this during 2021. Yeah. So during COVID, just as a way to document the process of what I was working through, but also, hopefully to help other people as well and speak about the things that I was having a hard time with in my own art. As you said before, like not thinking your work is up to a standard or not thinking that anyone will enjoy your work is a hard place to be. But when you have such a small audience, when you haven't got eyes on your work, you can't definitively say that no one enjoys your work. I think if you're creating from yourself, there is always anything you can be interested in, you will find others who are. And I always believe in that because you just haven't gotten to that audience yet. And I tell people all the time, if you're passionate about it, you will find your audience. You've just got to, and maybe it's another thing that you've got to do on the other end to work out how to find those people. You've got to get your art in front of the right people in order for then you feel like, oh, I am actually achieving something here. People are enjoying my work. That's a big sort of revelation for a lot of people. It's like when one person enjoys it, wow, like that was what it was like for me when I got a few people start to inquire with my work and be like, oh, I really like your work and I'll happily spend on your work. It's like, well, if there's these people out there, then there has to be others. Was there ever a stage for you when you were first starting? Like, do you remember what the first artwork was that you actually sold to someone?
Yeah, it was terrible. I mean, clearly not that terrible because someone bought it. I think I sold it for $20. So probably only covered the cost of the canvas. But it was a ocean piece. It was a really choppy ocean water piece. I remember I like followed a tutorial on YouTube and it was terrible. You could see some of the canvas bleeding through, but I think that's also a reminder to kind of look back at that and think, well, I was selling my work like pretty much as soon as I started painting, I was able to sell them. Because I only started painting in 2020. And, within a few weeks of starting to paint, I was selling them, which I look back at and go, what? But I think what you were saying before, I identify with so much that the older I get, the more that I can really see that, what you put out into the world comes back to you. If you're bringing the positive vibes and you're a real brightness in the world, then people appreciate that and people gravitate towards it. And I think so much of our lives now is so dark and depressing, and we're in such a really difficult spot, not only as a country, but as an entire world. And I think it's really important to still have real beacons of hope. And I think art still has a huge place in that.
Absolutely. How do you find that trying to balance that, not putting too much of yourself into the art, but also trying to be that person that is inspiring to other people and is this real positive energy, because that's what you want your art to be? How do you find that balance of not going too hard? Because then when, as you said, an artwork doesn't sell or doesn't perform the way you thought it would, you can take too much of that on.
Yeah, I do. So I work predominantly with oil paints, but I do maybe once a month, I do what I call my acrylic reset, where I will get one of my really crappy canvases and a bunch of my old acrylic paint and I will literally just slap it onto the canvas. I will basically do art for art's sake. I will do something that really makes me feel at peace and like there's no pressure. And, you know, with commissions and things like that, with oil painting, it's hard to get caught up in the perfection of every little detail of a painting, as I'm sure you probably feel as well with photography. Especially with wedding photography, I imagine that's a huge pressure. So I try to every so often do something that, oh, who cares? Who cares what it looks like? If it ends up like mud, who cares? Just do something for you. And at the moment, I'm moving into a new house, and it's been fun finding all of these like paintings and stuff on Pinterest and on Etsy that I'm totally not my style, but I'm replicating them for our walls because I don't want to buy them brand new. So yeah, I think just finding a bit of fun again, as often as you can, when it's very easy to get, you know, trapped in the seriousness of it all.
And also like create for yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's such a big thing. Like so many people I talk to, when your hobby becomes your job, and it sounds like for you that was almost straight away. Like you started earning income through it and started getting paid for it, even if you're not like earning your whole income through it. When you start to get paid from it, it's then hard to keep up that enjoyment of it outside. And I tell people, just go out and do it just for what you want to do. And you've got to do like one piece of work for them and one for me, if that's the way that keeps you, you know, inspired and keeps you like moving on, because it can become so hard if you're just constantly working for other people to then see, well, you start to lose sight of what it is you enjoy about it when you're continually going back for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, when's the last time you took a photo that was just for you?
So I do a lot of like landscape stuff. So I do a lot of landscape photography, and I love that. And I started in the very early days when I started landscape photography. So I did that way before I did wedding photography. It was probably my introduction to photography because I love going out and just taking photos of things. And I tried to sort of sell that photography, and it did well, but the overwhelming sort of pressure to feel like I was creating for something else or for an art piece, it sort of detracted from my enjoyment of it. So now I just have that as something that I just do in my own time and by myself. And I find that, especially going to new places, I find it so inspiring just to get out there and take an image just for me. Even if I'm just adding it on Instagram, it doesn't, like, it's not up for sale for anyone else. It's just for my enjoyment of it. And I can really detach it as well from what other people then have to say about that, because I know that it's just for me. If it's either here or there for other people, there'll be some people that really enjoy it, some people that who will have something to say about it online. That's just how online it is as soon as you put a piece of art up. But I can then detach myself and say, well, actually, look, I enjoyed this, and this actually means something to me because of where I was at that stage in my life or who I am now. Are you someone that does like free work for other people as well, or for yourself or for friends?
It depends. I don't like to do free stuff because I don't have a lot of time anyway. And it can be difficult when the requests that you get from friends are actually so outside of what you do and where your skill set lies. Like, as an artist, I don't think anyone can ever escape the "can you paint my dog" question. No, I cannot. I'm sorry. There are so many talented artists that can. But I do paint for my family when they request them. My partner has so many paintings that I have done for him. My sister has a few, and my parents have a few. But and when I have like things like, I just ordered some calendars for last year, and I sent a bunch to my family, and they do what they will with them. But my sister is so lovely. She went and bought like 10 calendars, which was like $400 worth of stock. And I'm so lucky to have a family that is so supportive of that as well. And they don't necessarily always ask me to do things for free. My parents as well at the moment are commissioning me to do like 3 paintings, but they're paying for them. And I think that that's just, it's so lovely, and it makes me feel so loved as well, because it's, you know, when your family recognizes that it is a skill and a talent and it takes time to do and it's worth something. I think, I don't know, it just really elevates me in that way, I think.
Well, how about we talk about that? Because for you, like family, it seems to be like they're very supportive, and it's lovely to hear that. Were they always that way? Has that been something that has been instilled in you to just, you know, they'll be there to support you and you can just go and do whatever you want to do, and that you know that they'll always have your back?
Yeah. My family are so supportive. I don't think they thought that my art would necessarily ever be something that would make me any income or fulfill me. I was always an artist. Like, there's photos that my mum has taken of me where I'm in my bed as like a 13-year-old with like a cut up piece of newspaper, and I'm like hanging above my head. God knows what I'm doing with it. But yeah, they've always been so incredibly supportive of that spirit in me, and they haven't tried to squash it at all. But I think we're all surprised that I've been able to continuously grow as an artist, and that, you know, it seems to keep growing. I think maybe we all thought that it would get to a point and then stop, or it would just always be something that, you know, oh yeah, I sell one painting here, and which still has its merit too, not taking away from that. But yeah, I just don't think any of us thought that it would actually work, and here we are. And you know, I send them links now to like the podcasts I do. Like, I'll send them one of this, and they're just like, oh, okay, like someone wants to talk to you, like someone reached out. And I don't know, it just makes me feel extra like also happy at that, because I mean, even when you reached out, I'm like, oh, you know, people know that I exist. They're not a huge amount of people, but enough people that they're interested in what I'm doing and they want to hear from me. And I just think that's so cool.
That is cool. Like, how many people do we really need to be across our work? Like, there's that, like, of course you need a few people, like we were talking about before, like you've got to get your work out there to people, but how many people do you really need? Especially in your line of work, I'm sure that you get a lot of people who come back to you after you've done one piece for them, and they'll come back and ask for an extra one. Do you have a lot of, is that a big part in your business? Like, getting return people come back? And I'm sure that that's, going back to talking about success, like that's a really good way to say, well, this person really enjoys my work.
Yeah, I have not many, but there are a couple of people who I see their names quite frequently when I do my releases, and oh, like I literally nearly cry when I think about it. I have one particular person who has bought at least like 4 to 5 of my paintings over the last like 3 years. So they would have some ancient archival works that are terrible, and they would also have some better ones that I've done more recently. And it makes me smile thinking that they have maybe like a little wall in their house that's a little Charli wall. And yeah, that's so emotional for me that someone would be willing to come back and keep buying other ones. And I mean, commissions also are just so special to me when someone, you know, really trusts you with a vision, and they want to, you know, spend the extra time and money to really get it perfect, and they choose you to do that. It's a lot of pressure, but it's so lovely.
As someone who, I kind of define myself as more a documenter rather than someone that creates original art pieces, because I'm sort of documenting what's happening there already. So I have, you know, I don't have to have ideas, right? I do have to, there's definitely creative things that come into it, but the overall element is I'm working for someone else. How do you go about that? Is your art is very much you, but then you're talking about commissioning work. how does that process sort of look? What do people come to you and ask for? How involved are they? How involved are you?
Mm. Well, I think actually you and I are probably a lot more similar than what we think in our work, because a lot of where my focus is capturing memories or a particular moment in time. I love replicating landscapes as is, tweaking them a little to make them feel a little bit more magical and airy, but reference photos are my savior. You know, I love painting from life. And so there's that element to it. But so when someone comes to me and, you know, they have a photo of a memory or something that they want to replicate, usually it's a landscape or it's a particular thing that they have in mind. I love to be able to do that image justice. And there's a little bit of back and forth between myself and whoever's commissioning the work, and we figure out what needs to be changed and what can be the same. But it's so nice to have a small community at the moment. You know, I only just hit 2,000 followers on Instagram, and of those 2,000 people, you know, the ones who do reach out to me for commissioned works know that it's not going to be perfect, that I am going to change things and I am going to make it a little bit more my own. And they are on board with that, and they know that that's part of the painting process. So I'm really lucky in that sense. And I hope that if I continue to grow, that I don't lose that, that people don't expect perfection, because I think, you know, it's so nice to be able to capture imperfections. And when we think of so many famous art pieces or photographs, a lot of them are not perfect, and that's what makes them these incredible paintings or photos.
And it comes down to how you display that as well. Like a big part of it is people know where you're at because you're so open and you share where you are, and you've definitely shared other pieces of work in the process as well. I tell people all the time, don't be scared of ever putting yourself out there, because you'll never be able to let someone down if you have already revealed everything about how it is you do something, because people are inquiring or asking you for works based on where it is you are now. They're not asking you to be someone you're not. Otherwise, they're coming to the wrong person. So that's why it's so important to just be yourself and not display works that aren't true to you, or try to act like you're someone you're not, because then that's when you fall into the trap of people not being happy with the final result because they were expecting something else. And art's such a grey area where, of course, there's no like parameters around what is a good artwork and what's not. It all comes down to style. And so when someone's asking you based on your style, can you do this for me? They're expecting that exactly. So whatever you come back with, I'm sure that's a rewarding feeling to be in the driver's seat of that and say, well, I can now go in whatever direction I want with this. We've had that chat, but also at the end of the day, there's nothing that this doesn't have to be perfect. If they're after the image, they would have just had the image hung on their wall, but they've come to me for something specific.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a place that you draw inspiration from when you're thinking about your own art pieces or other ones that you've created outside of that commission work, and where did you build that style from over time?
I definitely get a lot of inspiration and fulfillment from the ocean, and I know that sounds a little cliche, but you know, my phone is filled with just sunset photos of the water. I grew up basically along the beaches in Sydney, and so since childhood I've had such a connection with that. And you know, anytime I live somewhere where I can literally smell the salty water, I just feel so at ease and so at home. And I think that's so interesting that, you know, wherever you grow up and spend the most of your childhood, you do have this subtle desire to go back to that, and it comes out in really interesting ways. And for me, it's that connection to the water, and a lot of my pieces are focused on water and on the ocean, and I have such a love of it, and also a curiosity. The fact that we still don't know so many things about the ocean is so cool to me, but also the fact that we are absolutely destroying the world at the moment. And the one thing that I really want to focus on in my pieces is capturing what the world is now, because I'm not sure if it's going to stay this way, to be honest. And I think there's a chance, if people do right by my works and they take care of them, that they hopefully don't end up in landfill and they do survive, a couple hundred years. And if that does happen, I don't need to be a famous artist, but I would just love for my art to be a reminder of what we had and what we unfortunately are probably going to lose in the next 100 to 200 years.
I definitely see that come through in your work as well. Like the ocean are definitely, if anyone has seen your work, if they haven't, please go check it out, because it's very much, you can tell the ocean's coming through. How else does that feeling of sustainability and that inspiration for you, how does that come through in the way that you do art as well? I know you touched on before in not wanting to over-create and, that over-consumerism. How does that also come through in the way that you do art and how you want to give that back to the world?
Well, when I first came into painting in 2020, it was only because I had a relative pass away and they left me a lot of their art supplies and a lot of their paints. And so that's why I originally started painting. And when I did, and when I actually started researching and looking into it, I very quickly was sobered by the realization that a lot of art practices, in particular oil painting, is so harmful. It can be so toxic. And yes, we're getting better at that. But there's so many elements within art that I think really need to be improved in terms of, as you say, the over-consumerism of art and our need to just constantly produce works to be bought. And it's a really interesting thing because art in itself is made to be consumed. And so we're part of that system that, I'm trying to break away from. And in my small neck of the woods, how I do that is I have half of the paintings that I produce be made from entirely secondhand materials. So whether or not that's sourced from Facebook Marketplace, where people are just like giving it away. I had a friend in Sydney who basically worked on a film set and they were throwing away all these big chunks of wood. And so she cut them all up for me into these canvas size pieces. And I still have some of them that I use to make paintings. And for those pieces, all the way from the paints to the brushes, everything that goes into it is entirely secondhand. And I think that that's really special because not a lot of people are doing work like that at the moment, where there's a real intentionality around making sure that the items that we're using to produce art don't end up in landfill. I think as artists, it's very easy for us to take for granted the work that we do. And, people think art is just this incredible thing. And we don't often actually examine ourselves and our practices, how much plastic goes into art, how much toxic chemicals go into what you're creating. Are you giving yourself cancer? Maybe, with all the materials you're using. Yeah, I just think it's really important that as artists, we actually take a moment and we pause. And, as we were both saying before, ask yourself why you're creating. Are you creating to make yourself money? Probably shouldn't be creating. Are you creating simply because your audience is connected and you just want to fulfill them? Then you probably shouldn't be creating. And I think a lot of artists, unfortunately, have fallen into that trap of getting to the point of popularity where they lose that connection with why they're making art and what's the purpose of what we are actually creating. And I think there's a real opportunity now more than ever, with so much going wrong in the world, that we can use our art as a tool for advocacy and as a way to show people the way forwards. And I'm really missing that. I'm really missing, when I was in high school, we would study all of these revolutionary artists that had these really incredible ways of doing things. And, it was a way to stick up the finger at the government. And there's so many people throughout history who have done such incredible things with their art. And unfortunately, I'm just not seeing that a lot at the moment. And I would love for that to come back.
Where do you see that role of like activism, advocacy in art? I know if it's a very contentious thing for a lot of people to think about art being infiltrated in that way. But as you said, it's always been like that. I don't think that's a new thing. Where do you see the place for that at the moment, especially you touched on before, the world being in the place that it is, the environment being where it is as well? Do you see that as something that you can contribute towards?
Absolutely. I mean, that's such a huge question, so I'll just answer my component of it. But, I think that question that you just asked, a lot of artists need to figure out what their answer to that is. But for me, it is that real connection to environmentalism and to making sure that wherever I can, I am reducing my environmental footprint. The work in itself that I'm still using inherently is toxic. And so there is, it is a bit hypocritical of me to say, because if I really wanted to break away from consumerism and to totally reduce my environmental impact, I would just stop. But I think that's such a difficult thing because have you watched The Good Place?
I have seen, parts of it, yeah.
I feel so much like that show is the most relevant thing in the world right now, where no matter what you do, you are contributing to the problem because we are so entrenched in this system of capitalism and consumerism. No matter what you do, whether you buy some flowers from the corner shop or if you go and you buy yourself a new set of jeans, you're probably contributing to an injustice somewhere in the world. And that's such a difficult thing to wrap your brain around as such a small person, and we feel like we can't do anything. But I think we've lost that connection to, well, actually, no, you can do something. You can make small intentional actions every day. You can make those choices to do what you can to contribute to the problem. And, this system that we live in, it can't be entirely dismantled unless, meteor hits the earth and we'll die. But it can be slowly chipped away at, and we can slowly and gradually change the system that we work in. And hopefully with evolutions in technology, we can figure out ways that we can actually turn the clock backwards on the environment, but it's probably not going to happen. So what I'm trying to do is trying to advocate for more ethical art practices and encourage artists to really consider their environmental footprint and think about ways that they could do some small things every day to reduce that.
I think there's so much in that, but I find the real strength of being an artist and being a business owner in general, I think, and owning a creative business, the strength that a lot of people overlook is your ability to choose what you do. And you have a lot of choice and a lot of freedom to do what you want. Art is always going to be there. People are always going to be purchasing art. So to step away because you're contributing to the problem, I think is the wrong way to go about it. Like you said, we can then make change from the inside and choose, as you said as well, like, where do you source your materials from? What do you stand for in art? How do you produce art? I'm always someone like, as a photographer, I have to work with a lot of other different people as well on my art. It's not just ever like me. And so choosing who I'm working with, if I'm going to get a work printed out, who do I then go to? Like, who do I work with? Is that person where do they get their printing materials from? Like, I can then trace a lot of stuff back, and you can be that change, even if it is small, for people then to realize that that's a normal thing. What you were touching on before as well, like the size of your artworks, like making them larger artworks, maybe making it less accessible for some people, but it's probably allowing those pieces to last a lot longer than small pieces that people are happy to just consume and throw out when they're over them. So there are small little things that you can do from the inside that are going to help moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, growing up, the whole turn the tap off when you're brushing your teeth, all these little things that we were able to consume and manage when it came to environmental advocacy or climate change. I think we need to get back to that. I think we need to, as people, think through what are the small things that are actually achievable for me to do. Because it's so easy to get locked and frozen by how crap everything is. That we just need to find the small things. If you can achieve one small thing every day that is changing the behavior that unfortunately society has conditioned you for, then that's still one small thing that is being chipped away. And
it's so important to be yourself through that. I always think about whenever I can get someone to appreciate the work that I do or the photography that I do, I'm moving that person away from moving them from somewhere else that may have been a position of over-consuming. Like with your work as an artist, whenever you're actually doing a good thing by putting your art out there and giving people option to choose you over choosing a big commercial industry that's not really caring about that stuff, and you're moving people away and giving them that other option that they wouldn't have had you just stepped away and not been there in the first place. Also, to see what you've been able to put into the work and think about how that evokes different emotions in different people. I think that's really special, and hopefully through seeing your works, they're able to then reflect and have them when people have them in their houses and things like that. That is something that that will have always been the reason behind that work.
Thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
How do you think about putting your work out there in the world? We talked about Instagram before as a big advertising platform, and it's obviously where I heard about your work from. Are there ways that you think about or specific practices that you go about getting your art out there in the world to those people who really need it?
Yeah, well, at the moment, it's been primarily on social media. I think it's such an incredible platform, the fact that we can reach so many people. But last year, I started doing a lot more gallery exhibits, and because of that, my local gallery has now invited me to do almost like a little TED Talk in May, which is lovely. So I'm going to be doing a keynote presentation on exactly what we were just talking about, over consumerism and environmentalism in art. And so I think there are other ways to reach people that maybe I just haven't tapped into yet, or haven't had the time to. But predominantly it's been on social media, but it's so exhausting as well, social media. And I feel like we don't talk about that enough. I had one video go viral recently. I think it has nearly 1 million views now. And all of the comments are men telling me that I'm a prostitute, or that my work is crap, or just the most heinous things. And even people private messaging me and saying the most ridiculous, heinous things. So it's so hard to not get burnt out.
It's very challenging to feel that way. I spoke to a photographer recently, a female photographer, who shared an Instagram reel, basically the exact same thing that I said. They said, we were both educating on something, and we talked about the exact same thing. I got so many people saying how much they appreciated me sharing that work and how they'd never heard it that way before. The other person who did it, all the comments underneath were just this is incorrect, this is wrong. And I can't help but think that the only difference between the two, is that I'm a man. And to see that, horrible to think that people, are online and just think that because they're there, that gives them a right to have something to say about it when they don't know who's on the other side. They don't understand anything about that. And I'm sure, coming from your content, I'm not sure which piece you're talking about, I'm sure it wasn't super controversial what you were posting.
No, No, it wasn't at all. It was literally like a 3-second clip of me showing that someone had walked up to my art stall, because I had done like a Christmas art stall, and someone handed me $100 and didn't ask for any painting, just said to me like, I think your work is incredible. This is so inspiring. I just wanted to give you some money. And it was such a nice thing for someone to do, and I've never had that happen to me. And yeah, instead of people commenting that that's so lovely and that more people should be doing that, I got, you're a prostitute, you sold him something else. All these connotations that the money that someone had freely given me because they thought my work was incredible was somehow indicative of me being a sex worker. It was just such a wild response. And yeah, I don't know how to get past that. I think I just have to ignore it, because it just makes me so angry. And I want to get into the comments and to argue with these people, because why should they be able to say those things? But I know giving them a response is exactly what they want.
Yeah. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, you've got to, like, I don't want to ever justify what they've done, and you should never have to deal with that. But I think for a lot of people, as you said, we should be talking about this more because it is the truth. And I still get some of these things as well sometimes, of people will just have something to say about anything. They don't know who you are. And it's the issue in a way. I tell people I don't like when my content goes viral online, because I get outside my audience of people who understand what it is that I do. But we have to have a way to deal with that, and understanding that what they want is a response. So you can't give them that. And just playing the game of like, well, they've probably helped you to get to more people. Every time I post a video that does well, I'm like, well, it allowed me to probably get a few more people in my audience. And as we said before, cast my artwork over some more people who probably did need to see it. So I'm happy for people, because not everyone's going to agree. That's totally fine. They don't have to. But to feel like you've got to deal with that in the process is such a hard thing. And I don't think any of us will really ever have the answers. And the ones that say that they do and say that it's not impacting them, I don't believe them. So,
yep, for sure.
I really hate to ask this, but I think it could be helpful for a lot of people. Are there any ways that you have found helpful to get over that fear of people saying bad things about your work, or negative people online? Is there anything that you've done specifically just for people out there who may be in that position that are starting and have not come to terms with that? Because for the first time, it is seriously like confronting to think that you've only had friends and family in your audience, and they've all been so supportive, and then the one person that you hear from online is out there saying bad things. That can be, and I've heard from people before that has just been way too much for them. Have there been things that you've done, or is there a way that you like to think about it that has helped you?
Yeah, just don't take it personally. I know it's so much more complicated than that, but I think, I was bullied as a kid, and not extremely, but a little bit. Walked away with scrapes and bruises occasionally, and then when I was a bit older and I got a job in government, I was basically a frontline worker during COVID, and I had to deal with so much verbal abuse over phones every single day for about a year. And, these were people who said that they were going to rape me or find my family and kill them, and such heinous things that I would never repeat on any platform. And so I think in a way that kind of set me up for a bit of success, because I have already had to deal with that and had to come to terms with the fact that these people who bully you, whether it's when you're a child or when you're a worker or at any point, it's usually because of something that they've got going on. If someone who is bullying you or saying rude things to you does not know you at all, it is something going on in their lives. And even the people who do know you and they take it out on you, it is usually because of something that is going on in their own life. Maybe they've got stress, they're being bullied themselves at home. In reality, with social media and with, the evolution of the world, we have really lost that personal connection with a lot of people. We have no idea what people are going through and what they're experiencing in their own lives. And unfortunately, as a society, we are all suffering right now, except for the 1%. And I think that is something that definitely plays into that, and into people who are, as they say, keyboard warriors, are usually people who have no control in their personal lives. And so what they do have control over is what they can say to other people online, knowing that they're not going to have any repercussions. And so you just have to come to terms with that, unfortunately. It's such an unfair thing, the fact that the person who is, in a way, the victim has to be the one to come to terms with that and to face that reality. And it's such a cliche, but you do have to be the bigger person in that way and just know that person is suffering and that it's not personal. And so that's kind of what I just have to always go back to, that unfortunately a lot of us are suffering, and the only way that a lot of people feel to take power in their own lives is to diminish someone else. But usually the person who is doing the diminishing, it's because they're coming from a place of lesser power than you. It's not often that someone who has more power or more influence is the one that is going to be doing that and saying those things. So just have to acknowledge that and get past it, I guess.
I'm so sorry that you had to experience some of those things and deal with those type of people in person, but online as well. And I don't think anyone should ever have to deal with that. But that is the attitude, and I'm glad that you've been able to share that with all of us. And I appreciate you opening up and sharing that, because it's important for a lot of people to hear that it does happen. And I always tell people, as you said, don't take advice from people who aren't in the position where you don't want to be. If no one above you is ever going to critique your work, no one who's been successful as an artist is ever going to critique another artist's work, because they understand what it was like to be in that position. And so if someone who doesn't understand is telling you your artwork's bad, even, don't take that to heart. Unless they're not a successful artist, they don't know what they're talking about, and art is subjective at the end of the day. And when it comes to personal things, again, it speaks more to them than it does to you. They don't know you. So you have to be the bigger person. Unfortunately, as you said, it always comes back to the person who's been hurt in that situation to be the bigger person. But you have to move past and accept, and hopefully take a bit of pride that your work is out there in the world. It's one of those bad things we've got to deal with. But I'm always for the hundreds of people that reply, and maybe some of them are bad, I know that I'm not someone that ever replies to anything on Instagram, because that's just the way I am. And so there are other people out there that are just like me, who are sitting back and appreciating the work that I do, but they're the ones that aren't as outspoken as others. So that's who I keep creating for.
Yeah. And what a nice thing.
Yeah, I think that, and I hear from those, and those are the people that will come up to me in person and say that they're so appreciative. They're the people who probably come to your art stalls and say they really love your work because they've been following you online for so long, and that's when it really gets that point home, that it is so worth it, that what you do is worth it online. And some of those things, yes, there are going to be bumps in the road, and it's not always going to be easy, but that's why we create. And I think that is so special.
Mm.
I did want to change up a little bit, but I think it ties into what we were talking about in your other role that you brought up before. And I think that obviously would help you have a sense outside of your artwork. You're not someone that does art full time, and I think that that's important to touch on. Do you want to talk to people about your other role as a CEO? Because I think that is so special and a very unique position for a lot of people. And also to touch on how that sort of informs your art as well. I think what you do is very intertwined with your art and your sort of purpose behind art. So that would be lovely.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I'm a CEO of a small charity called Oak Tree, and we are a youth-led organisation who works primarily in international development. So our organisation exists to empower young people to make meaningful changes in their local communities in the Asia Pacific. So how we do that is by giving small untied grants to youth-led movements across the Asia Pacific. And we're really proud of that work. And I'm so lucky to be part of the organization. It's something that I've wanted for a really long time. I followed them for a few years prior to obtaining the role. And I even, tried to get a role at the company like 4 years ago and was unsuccessful. And it kind of full circle moment to come back and be like, ha, now I'm your CEO. But I think it's so powerful to be able to continue to create art that makes meaning for me, but then also in my professional life, be a part of something that is also helping other people in different communities. Before, when you were talking about the kind of like, how do you get over those slumps of your art not being everything you want it to be, and for me it's knowing that elsewhere in my life I can find that fulfillment and that I can help people and I can do my part in making just one person feel a little bit safer or feel like they are creating the change in their communities that they want to see. And that's something so special to me and so inspiring for me to continue to do, my trash pieces that are made of secondhand materials, is seeing all of these youth-led companies across the Asia Pacific and all of the incredible things that they are doing when they are usually 1 to 2 people in these companies just starting out, and they are trying to fix really systemic problems within their communities that are really entrenched in their societies and very, very difficult to overcome. And I feel so lucky to be able to be in a position of power where I can help them and I can do something to make a difference. And I would really encourage artists who are just starting out to find another way to get that fulfillment in their life that's not just from their art. I know that's a different opinion to a lot of people. A lot of people would say, no, just go all in, do what makes you happy. But, as we were saying, it's very, very easy to do that and then to fall into a really bad cycle with your art where you lose that connection because it does become your job, and how you feed yourself and how you meet your basic needs. And yeah, I just think it's really important for us all to make sure that in everything that we're doing, we are finding a way to make the world a little bit better. And I know that, I really come from a place of privilege, being able to say that I have been educated in a university and able to, as a white woman who's young, step into a role like this in a country where we are very well off comparatively to a lot of other countries. And so, take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I am not the expert on everything. And there is definitely so much room for improvement, not only for me, but for everyone, I think, of our generations. And I'm totally going off on a tangent here, but I think that another thing that we really need to keep a hold of and not lose sight of is that every person should be able to evolve and to change over time. And, I think if we were having this conversation 5 years ago when I was in a totally different role, I would not be able to say the things that I'm saying now and to have the insights that I'm having now. And you probably wouldn't even want to talk to me. So I think it's really important that we all keep learning and keep trying to do our best.
And what was it for you that brought about that change, or how did you, because it is very hard to go through a period of changing who you are, or when you have a big sort of revelation in your life and you feel like you have to change your beliefs, to feel like you're throwing everything out that you've done up until that point. How do you have that change, and were there things that you did in your life to reflect and to turn back and get yourself to a position that made you feel more comfortable?
Mm. I heard this thing not long ago. It might have just been on TikTok. It might have been a silly TikTok video, but that's fine. Um, where it said, you know, the world will keep giving you the same problem until you change the way that you were facing it. And I very much, looking back, realized that that's what happened to me. When I was coming towards the end of uni and I was stuck in that job that I really didn't like, I kept having these really important things happen in my life, and then something would go wrong and it would be taken away. I was meant to go on exchange for a year and live out my life in France, and then COVID happened and I had to come home. And I wouldn't be the person I am today if that didn't happen to me. I think I was patient 270 in Australia who had COVID and accidentally brought it home from France. So sorry, everyone. But I really do believe that, like, if you are experiencing continuous pain and agitation in your life where nothing feels like it's fitting and you're not going anywhere, have a look internally and think about, is this all coming back to the same issue? Is this quite literally the same problem that I am facing in different industries, in different aspects of my life, but it's me that's not changing? And for me, the only way that I was able to break out of it was to go and get myself some therapy, and to make a huge change. So I moved from Sydney to Melbourne, which was such a huge change. And I got a therapist, and I was in therapy for like a year. And I think that really just changed my life. Making such a big change and then getting myself the help that I needed to really examine why I kept making the same mistakes and why I felt like my life wasn't moving, is something that I think we should all do at some point in our lives. Make a really big change and really look internally and spend that time really getting to know yourself and why you react the way that you do to things and how can you change. Because otherwise, we'll all just be the same person. We'll all be deeply traumatized, immovable, and we'll end up like the movie WALL-E, where we all just sit in front of computers and we live in space and we don't care about anything beyond what's on our computer. So
I think through that change can come some of the best art as well, like some of the best expression when you're going through those times of not being able to understand who you are or understand how to deal with the world or people around you and what you believe. Some of the best art pieces over time have been created during stages of people's life like that. And to think that you're now in a position where you may not completely understand who you are, I don't think any of us really do, but to getting to a point where we're trying to learn and we're on that journey, and to see you create art from your heart and from what you believe, I think is so special. And for everyone, I hope that everyone could find that place that they're creating in a way that feels genuine and authentic to them. And you have to do the work. There's nothing, the evolution and change over time. But I'm glad that it's brought you to here today. As much as I would love to have had that conversation with you 5 years ago, I'm glad that we're having it now, just to see the change. Yeah, I'm glad we're having it now, and I do want to say thank you for sharing so much on the podcast today, Charli. Where can people find more about you, or hear more about your story, or see more of your art?
Yeah, I mean, just on all my socials, really. I'm just Charli English Art on Instagram and on Facebook. And I also have a TikTok, which I barely post on because TikTok is a chasm. And I also have my website, which is just Charli English. But I am so open to talking to people. And if you want to, have a chat with me more, please just send me a DM, or I can even put my email in the show notes, or however people want to, communicate with me. I try to be as honest and as open as possible. So nothing is off limits. If anyone ever needs anything or wants to get in touch, please do.
Well, I really appreciate you for that, Charli, for being so open on this episode, and also for being as humble as you are. Don't forget about the keynote talk as well. That was I love that you just added that in, just slid that into the conversation, then on to the next thing. Like, I feel like that's such a big thing, and you just moved on from it. Didn't even touch on that, but.
If anyone wants to come hear me talk more, I'll be at the Imprint Symposium on the 4th of May at the Victorian Arts Society. There are only 50 tickets left. So if you do want to come see me talk a little bit more about art and environmentalism, please come.
That'll be very special. I'll definitely put links to all of that down below, and your email address if you're open to putting that out there in the world. And I thank you for actually taking the time to speak to people and be so open about your art and what you've been going through. It's so important that we sort of give back in that way, because I don't know about you, but I didn't have a lot of people in my surroundings when I first started that I could talk to, and hearing other people's stories online was the place that I always went to for that sort of stuff. So it's lovely that we can then contribute and give back in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. If someone who's listening now feels it feels like they're a kindred spirit, it's making a change in their life too. So incredible work that you're doing with your podcast. So thank you so much for having me. And I feel so honored to be a guest and that you found me and invited me on. So thank you so much.
So glad that I found you, Charli. Thank you so much for jumping on today.
No problem at all. We'll see you soon.
Well, that is the end of today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation half as much as I enjoyed having it. If you did enjoy today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you did leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify. Or if you're watching over on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment down below to let us know that you did enjoy this episode. Also, feel free to share this episode on Instagram and tag me at Mike Jeffrey Photography so I can reshare them on my stories. And also message me and let me know who you would love to hear on an upcoming episode of this podcast. You know, I've always tried my best to be able to have conversations with people who are in the creative space and people that I think would be a good fit on this podcast. And I would love your input as well. In a very privileged position at the moment where, you know, I'm able to reach out to people and have them on my podcast and have really interesting conversations with a whole range of people in the creative space and talk about their creative journey. So if there is anyone you would love to hear from, please let me know and I will do my best to try to get them on the podcast. At this time, I would also like to acknowledge the first creatives of the land on which I am recording today, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of so-called Australia. As we tell stories of today, I just want to reflect on how First Nations people here and across the globe have guided and informed our understanding of the creative journey. But until next week, friends, have a lovely week and I will speak to you all again next Monday. Bye. Editing and post-production on this episode was done by Mossy Heart Media, and music was created by J.W. Payton.
Hey Mike.